Okay, guys, so this podcast is going to be on learning target number 3. It's a pretty short one. It's just the microscopic anatomy of bone. So we're going to be looking at some of those interesting patterns that we saw when we looked at bone under the microscope and kind of talk about what those features are. So this would be a good time to make sure you're split screened with your notes, and we should be following in the correct order. So just go to the next slide and you should see the section on microscopic anatomy of bone. Okay, so now let's look at some of the features of the microscopic anatomy of bone. So we'll go through each of the various words, and then I will highlight them in the picture and explain to you where they are. So first, let's start with an osteon. You'll notice there's a similar pattern with a lot of words that have to do with bone. Remember, bone is also called osseous tissue. So a lot of the bone vocabulary starts with OS. So an osteon, you see in this picture here, that is one whole concentric circle. So when you looked at it under the microscope, or we looked at the picture under bone under the microscope, you saw all of those individual circles. So one circle is called an osteon, and it's got the central canal in the middle, and then it has the matrix of rings surrounding it. Okay, the next feature that you see when you look at bone under a microscope is an osteocyte. An osteocyte is a mature bone cell. So you can see those located right here. They're kind of purple in your picture. Wow, that's a really thick pen. Hold on. Okay, they're kind of purple in your picture, if you see them there. So there's a few of them, and you can see they're kind of sitting in these little depressions. So those are osteocytes. That's a mature bone cell. When we talk a little bit about damages to bone and growing bone, we'll talk about the exact function of the bone cells and how they work to build bone around them. Okay, the next feature you'll see is the lacuna. The lacuna, or lacunae, is where the mature osteocytes will sit. So those are the little depressions that you see. So this is one single lacuna, and then if we're talking about all of them, it's lacunae for plural. So those are just the depressions that the mature bone cells, the osteocytes, are sitting within. Okay, the next feature is the lamellae. The lamellae are the concentric circles that the lacunae form into. So if we trace just a few of them, here are the lamellae. These are just these concentric circles that form from all of the lacuna. So when you look at it under the microscope, for example, in the picture on the right, you see those concentric rings. Those are the lamellae. Okay, and probably the most prominent feature is the Haversian canal. The Haversian canal is that big center canal that you can see I'm tracing in purple that runs lengthwise through the bone, and that's what's carrying all the blood vessels and nerves. So if you look at the picture on the left, you can see the blood vessels and the nerves running through the center of that osteon. By the way, in that picture, we are just looking at a portion, I'm gonna zoom in, a portion of the osteon, like a fourth of the osteon. So the whole osteon would actually be like a big circle like this, right? And here's the center. So we're just looking at a piece of it. So that center Haversian canal you can see has blood vessels and nerves running through it. Okay, and then the last feature you're going to see when you look at bone under the microscope is the caniculi. These are the tiny little canals that are radiating outward from that big central canal, and it's kind of forming like a transportation system through the bone. So, for example, the Haversian canal, you can picture like the big major highway, and then the little caniculi that radiate outward from it are the little side streets. Okay, so let me zoom in really quick on the picture and show you those. Okay, so the caniculi are going to be, oh, that's a bad color. Let me pick a brighter color. We will try this bright blue color. Okay, so the caniculi are going to be, there we go. these little canals that you see running throughout the bone matrix. And that is again for transportation. So the nutrients, the blood can get to and from that Haversian canal throughout the whole bone matrix. So that's what those caniculies are within the bone. Okay, on the next slide, you just see another, a different cross section of bone, just showing it to you in a slightly different way. So if we zoom in, we're looking at a cross section of a long bone, and notice we're looking specifically at compact bone here. This is spongy bone down here at the ends. That's why it kind of looks a little different. So when we talk about the microscopic anatomy of bone, we are specifically talking about compact bone only. That's when you're going to see these osteons like in the picture we just looked at and in this picture as well. So let's find some osteons. So remember, the osteons are those concentric rings that you see. So I'm just going to use red and I'm going to circle a few. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. These are all osteons. Here's one that's being, I guess this whole thing would be one. Let me erase that. So this whole thing is one osteon that's kind of been pulled out, and then the concentric rings have even been separated. Okay, so you can see all the osteons. Notice the Haversian canals in the center of each one. I'm just highlighting those in blue. So take a look at those. There's those Haversian canals running through the center. Here is the inside of a Haversian canal, just so you can see what that looks like and how the blood vessels are running through it. So remember, we talked about from Unit 2, blood is extremely well vascularized. It heals very well. And this is why, because you can see all of these blood vessels running throughout the bone. Okay, so I think it always helps to draw a picture, at least for me. So we're going to draw an image of a compact bone drawing. So start by picking a color for your osteon. I'm just going to do this red color. And I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 osteons. Okay, so each one of those is an osteon. Okay, next I'm going to pick a color for my Haversian canal, and that is the big canal that is running in the center of each of the osteons. So go ahead and draw that in. Okay, next pick a color for the lamellae. The lamellae are going to be those rings that are the concentric rings in each osteon. Okay, if you guys are in Notability, you can use that nice circle feature that makes those perfect circles for you. I am not in Notability, so mine are a little messier, but here's the lamellae, the concentric rings in the bone marrow. I'm in the matrix of the bone. And then pick a color for the lacunae. Those are going to be these little depressions that are all along the lamellae. They're formed in these little concentric circles, or arranged in these little concentric circles. So put some of those throughout your lamellae. These are the lacuna. If you're in Notability, you could even copy and paste one osteon if you want, so you don't have to do it every time. Okay, so there's my lacuna. They're little depressions. And then within each lacuna is a mature bone cell. We call those the osteocytes. So pick a color for your osteocyte. I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to put a little bone cell inside each of my depressions. So this is a mature bone cell. When we talk about bone formation, next week we'll talk about exactly the function of these bone cells. Okay, I'm going to put some here too. There are our osteocytes inside these little depressions last one. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got. Zoom out. All right, so then the only thing we're missing is the caniculi, which those are the um, little tiny tracks, for lack of a better word, that runs through the bone matrix. So I'm just going to pick a color for my caniculi. I'm going to use this light blue. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to do one of them here, and you just want to copy them throughout your other ones. So from the Haversian canal, just start drawing little tracks or canals through that bone matrix. So these are the caniculi. And actually, if we're doing it really properly, the caniculi would be going to all of the lacuna, right? And delivering the nutrients to those bone cells. Okay, so go ahead and do that to your other two as well. If you want to pause the movie, now might be a good time. All right, guys, so I hope that drawing helped you understand the microscopic anatomy of bone. We are not going to be looking at it under the microscope just because I didn't want to take any more time in this unit and get the microscopes out. And you've already seen it under a microscope, so that's why. So you won't see it as part of your lab, but hopefully that helped. There will be some questions on the test showing you the osteon images. And it's also important that we look at this so we understand how bone grows and how bone is repaired, and we'll talk about those two things next week. All right, guys, thanks for watching. At this time, you will continue on with your lab from yesterday. Hope you guys are doing good. I'll talk to you later.